morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
Last week, if you were able to ride along with us, you heard cowboy, teamster, farrier, and fine singer Randy Holler discussing a lot of things, but mostly teams of heavy horses and the art of being a teamster. Well, this week Randy's back to talk about a genuine superstar that he has an encyclopedic knowledge of, and that is the legendary Wilf Carter. But more than that, Randy will talk about another Canadian superstar entertainer.
Well, what a soldier he is, and play and sing and write a song, and boy, he does a job. And he gets a standing ovation every place he goes, and you know what? There's a man that truly deserves it.
And what's happened to those nice names folks used to give their kids back in the old days?
I can only imagine how this trend will continue. Ditch, hedge, culvert. Soon we will move on to calling our children after natural disasters.
And Baxter has some suggestions for kids' names of the future. And how are things going at the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Allowance Roundtable Talks?
I am pleased to report that we have found mutual agreement on many important issues.
Yeah, sounds promising. The Rangeland News has the whole story, though, and I've got a classic in the Cowboy Poetry Spotlight this week, recited by my late friend Ed Stabler.
As smooth as soup till some tourist guy bogged down in a pair of shaft, the rest of his ignorance plumb disguised in the rest of his rig, perhaps.
And thinking outside the box and using a horse's sense of self-preservation to get him over a phobia is the subject of the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File this week. And Randy Holler talks about Wilf Carter right after another Canadian legend, Dick Dameron.
He painted his songs like an old Western movie, sang from the heart, honest and strong. From the last rays of sunshine in old Arizona, he always remembered his Calgary home. From the great Rocky Mountains to the Alberta prairies, the Calgary Stampede where the chuck wagons roar, Wilf painted his songs and the life of the cowboy like old Charlie Russell and Louis L'Amour. I grew as a child to the songs of Wilf Carter, got my first guitar and learned every tune. When the last cowboy song is only an echo, I'll still hear Wilf Carter in the old prairie moon. From his ranch in the foothills at Crossfield, Alberta, he sang of Pete Knight and the Strawberry Roan. In old New York City, they called him Montana, but he always returned to his Alberta home. I grew as a child to the songs of Wilf Carter, got my first guitar and learned every tune. When the last cowboy song is only an echo, I'll still hear Wilf Carter in the old prairie moon. I grew as a child to the songs of Wilf Carter, got my first guitar and learned every tune. When the last cowboy song is only an echo, I'll still hear Wilf Carter in the old prairie moon. I'll still hear Wilf Carter in the old prairie moon.
The pride of Bentley, Alberta, Dick Dameron, and old D.D. spends most of his time in Mexico entertaining down there these days. Well, Randy Holler had just done a great set at the Stony Plain Cowboy Gathering, and as usual, he did a number of Wilf Carter songs. I caught up to Randy backstage.
Just like you, I grew up milking cows and listening to Wilf Carter, and my dad loved Wilf Carter songs, and it's so great that you're carrying them on, and what a story Wilf was. Did you get to meet him in person or ever be on stage with him?
I only met him a couple of times in a large crowd. Never had a one-on-one with Wilf, which I kind of wish I had, but I knew lots about him and studied his lifestyle and where he came from and what he did and how he made his way in the music business. It was different than it is now, of course. You do an audition and you get hired, and then somebody hears the audition, you end up on CBS radio to try the cowboy music. And it seemed to work, and when CBS went all across the continent, then of course, and then they nicknamed him Montana Slim to make him sound American.
Yeah.
And
was that because they didn't want to get him confused with the Carter family, who were going around the same time, Mother Maybelle? And...
Yeah, I suppose that Wilf did work with the Carter family. That's the old family, and I think that they, no offense, but the Americans like to change their name. You know, John Wayne was he was Marion Morrison, and
that's right.
Wilf Carter's Montana Slim. You know, so it's a good stage name, I suppose. It would be. Randy Holler seemed to work for me so far, anyway.
Did you change it, or is that?
I never changed it. It's always been that. Yeah, and I no.
You ever get introduced with an MC that's not concentrating, saying, "Now here he is, Randy Travis."
Randy Travis. No, I never had that happen to me. But I did have my show introduced as a tribute to Hank Williams one time.
Oops.
But anyway, went out and I sang a Hank Williams song, and then
you did.
We switched her over to. Had to smooth it over. So
okay, and you didn't think we'd get past this point without playing a Wilf Carter song, did you?
We're headed for the roundup, going to the big stampede. Old Dick Cosgrove riding in the lead. The old chuck wagon rattling and the snorting bucking bronc. We're headed for the Calgary stampede. Get around the old chuck wagon and get yourself some grub. Flip them flapjacks over in the pen. Old Jim Ross the cookie, he sure could throw her up. His chuck is good enough for any man. We're a jolly bunch of cowboys, we hope you are the same. We have no care, the laws we never heed. Gather in a circle and sing the roundup song. We're headed for the Calgary stampede. Them bucking broncs are snorting, the cowboys riding high. Longhorns pawing up the big corral. Waiting for the battle and a bellering in the chutes. And the cowboy yelling, ride 'em to their pal. Now grab yourself a sweetheart and join the cowboy ball. Hug 'em up and swing 'em all a whirl. Ask 'em how they'd like the life of a cooking on a ranch, and tell 'em all you wish they were your gal. We're a jolly bunch of cowboys, we hope you are the same. We have no care, the laws we never heed. So gather in a circle and sing the roundup song. We're headed for the Calgary stampede.
Randy Holler will talk about another one of his musical heroes when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. I'd like to take you back to the 25th annual Stony Plain Cowboy Gathering, and there I was backstage with the cowboy, teamster, farrier, and singer of Wilf Carter songs, Randy Holler.
Well, you know, there's some legends in the history of Canadian country, and at that time was country and Western music. When you think back on it, another one of my heroes was Stu Davis.
Oh, yes.
He had that radio show on CFCN, I think, in Calgary, and CJCA in Edmonton, and then Rope Around the Sun on CBC television, and then a trail riding troubadour, I think, or something like that. And I got to know his son, Dwayne Stewart, later on, and found out more about Stu Davis. But, boy, there were some legends, you know.
Yeah, Stu Davis, I remember when I was a kid, my mom, we just had the radio, of course, the battery radio, and did all our own sewing and cleaning and everything by hand, of course, and we had the Stu Davis show. We had Bev's Bunkhouse from CFCW, Curly's Corral. They'd have the Stu Davis show on. And so we had all those old radio shows, and I'd like to hear those again. Too bad our young people couldn't sit down and listen to them guys sing and how they introduced and the way they talked to them. It's so much different world now. E-talk is television, but the radio, I've always said I have a face for radio. And
yeah, I've been told that too.
Yeah, well, that's just what we're given. But anyway, it is really a different world now in the entertainment business, because it's more about how you sounded then. I think it's more about how you look now, and I think we have to, we have to change with the times, I guess.
Yeah, I think somehow we got to find that balance. I mean, we have to obviously be aware of the changing audience and the younger people and what their interests and everything are. But at the same time, somehow I think it's so important to honor these traditions, the foundations in the past.
And the guys that didn't win the lottery, like I say, guys that worked their way up, like Gary Felgard. To me, Gary Felgard he's a hero. There's a guy that started out, I don't know exactly how he started. He started with a guitar, and he could write a song and he could sing a song. And I don't know how old Gary is now, but I'm going to tell you, the guy sounds like he's 20.
Amazing.
And I don't know how he does it, but he just goes at her and he plays that guitar.
And what better time than this to play one of Gary's great songs?
Searching for freedom, westward the wagons, they settled in the valleys of sagebrush and pine. 100 years later, they are still in the saddle. In the smoke from our campfires, we can still see them ride. Cattle corrals and the hard edge of winter, a young bride impatient for the first breath of spring. Everything that they own was built with courage and muscle. I hope the old pioneers can still hear us sing. And we will ride under western skies, down the trail of a lonesome pine, across the creek and up the draw, along the river to the falls, riding high, riding tall, and riding easy. In the cool of the dawn, we will let those ponies run. We will ride under western skies. Freedom never came easy. There was one battle lost for every 2 battles won. If you stay on the land, all you sons and you daughters, you will ride in the glory in the last blazing sun. And we will ride under western skies, down the trail of a lonesome pine, across the creek and up the draw, along the river to the falls, riding high, riding tall, and riding easy. In the cool of the dawn, we will let those ponies run. We will ride under western skies, ride under western skies.
Western Skies, Gary Felgard, and that song is actually inspired by the many years Gary rode on the famous Kamloops cattle drive with us. And boy, we sure enjoyed that unamplified sound of his guitar around the campfire in the evenings. And I enjoy your playing too, Randy.
Just enough to get me by, I guess, but that Gary Felgard, I mean, he's amazing.
Finger picking is amazing, but I love your guitar style because it's straightforward and it's so similar, I think, to the way Wilf played.
Yeah, he played just the old thumb pick and
the basic chords.
Yeah, straight down and
but
bear
really
claw
well.
G.
Yeah,
the bear claw G, and he didn't play bar chords, and he played a few runs. Like I say, my hands for playing runs are almost had it. But
my farrier is a great singer, but he struggled, and a great guitar player too. But the same thing. Been shoeing horses for 25 years, and those fingers are not quite as agile as.
And a lot of things that happen to us at a certain age are hand-me-downs from our parents, say arthritis and whatnot. But anyway, I still do a little horseshoe, and I like to sing a little. And they have me
sing a little. My gosh,
they have me at Stony Plain pretty well almost every year, and I really appreciate them thinking about the old guy. You know.
It's nice that they're honoring those traditions.
Okay, we have more from Randy Holler in a little while. And next, Baxter Black has a look at old-fashioned names and a real song of the West from Marty Robbins. Then the Rangeland News, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan with a little peek at old-fashioned name.
If your group or association is planning a meeting and are on a thrifty budget, check out Virtual Video Baxter. That's me. I'll video a personalized welcome, then furnish several humorous stories to run between your speakers. Signbooks can be used as auction items. We've done rodeos, museums, bull sales, the Conservation Service. Use your imagination. Virtual Video Baxter. Give us a call, 800-654-2550 at baxterblack.com.
Sally took her daughter to enroll in an extracurricular English literature class. She met the teacher, a gray-haired, keen-eyed, matronly woman whose bearing and presence commanded respect. "This is my daughter Laura," Sally said. The imposing teacher's eyes narrowed. "Laura," she said, "I am so pleased to meet a young person with a real name. A beautiful name, a traditional, flowing, mellifluous appellation that resonates good taste. I, unfortunately," she continued, "have grandchildren named for common nouns depicting minor geographical features, such as ridge, brook, forest. I can only imagine how this trend will continue. Ditch, hedge, culvert. Soon we will move on to calling our children after natural disasters. Hurricane, avalanche, tsunami. These are my twins, tempest and typhoon, thunder and lightning, sleet and hail. What has happened to Richard, Neville, and Winston, Elizabeth, Odetta, and Edna? Will we progress to naming them after endangered species? These are my children, Cheetah, Whooping Crane, and Condor, my son, Galapagos Turtle, and his sister, Green Iguana, or maybe astrological phenomena, nebula, or diseases, Ebola and Brucella." The Native Americans were inspired by their natural surroundings to select names: Two Bears, Roan Horse, Blooming Prairie. Following their lead, our subdivision descendants will probably choose such beauties as Parking Lot, Multiplex, Richter Scale. The teacher took a deep breath and sighed. "Sorry to get wound up. It's so nice to meet you both. My name is Willie Mays McCullough. Me dad was a baseball fan." This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan. Thanks for listening.
In agriculture today, things are really changing fast, and our key to success is to stay ahead of the curve. Beef Tech at Northlands brings you the latest developments from agriculture's top experts. November the 8th and 9th, presented by Real Agriculture, an interactive beef industry learning event. Explore and experience emerging technologies and innovative management practices. Learn how to implement technology in your beef operation to improve production and profitability. Hands-on workshops and labs, technology demonstrations, technical learning sessions, featured keynotes Robert Sake of Agritrend and Andrew Campbell from Fresh Air Media. Get all the information at northlands.com/beeftech. The summer of 2017 will go down as one of the driest, hottest, dustiest years ever in western North America. Devastating wildfires in BC, Alberta, Montana, California, Washington, Idaho, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, and beyond. And while the cows were stirring up a lot of dust ahead of me as I rode through a part of the range that used to be pretty damp, I thought of a song written by Joe Babcock. Joe is one of the great harmony voices on a lot of Marty Robbins recordings. He wrote this one called Dusty Winds.
90 days since the country's seen a drop of rain. 44 since the grass began to burn. Thirsty cattle are milling round the old creek bed. Dusty winds where the waters used to churn. Dusty winds, hear them blow. Dusty winds moaning low. Night and day on they go, those dusty winds. Not a cloud in the sky, but still the sun shines dim, but enough to turn the scenery dark and brown. Looking westward is a dust cloud looming high in the sky, shows the trail of 50 settlers leaving town. Dusty winds, hear them blow. Dusty winds moaning low. Night and day on they go, those dusty winds. When it's late in the evening in my cabin all alone, it's so lonesome when that wind comes howling through. And I think of all the settlers heading west out of town. Kinda wished I'd have left here with them too. Dusty winds, hear them blow. Dusty winds moaning low. Night and day on they go, those dusty winds.
Now the news of the rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
Top of page 1, it says pressure seems to be mounting to save the North American Free Trade Agreement in spite of the U.S. President's commitment to do away with it. Round 2 is done, Round 3 is underway, and Rod Bain from USDA sends this report.
Round 2 of North American Free Trade Agreement renegotiations is in the books, concluding in Mexico City.
I am pleased to report that we have found mutual agreement on many important issues.
That's U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, joined by counterparts from Mexico and Canada at the second round closing press conference.
By the end of this round, we will have tabled over 24 chapters, and I look forward to continued progress in round 3 and the ones that follow.
The next round of NAFTA renegotiations takes place in Canada's capital city of Ottawa. And as Mexico's Secretary of the Economy, Ildefonso Guajardo Villarreal, closed the event, he told reporters that Mexican, Canadian, and U.S. officials
have instructed our CN's chief negotiators to really engage in the following weeks in a way in which the momentum of this process can be presented in the third round.
Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Wage growth in Canada accelerated last month at its fastest pace in the past 10 months, adding credence to the central bank's interest rate increase and lifting expectations that it will hike again by the end of the year. Average hourly pay rose 1.7% last month from a year earlier, and that was the strongest annual increase since October. As in many other countries, wage growth in Canada has been muted despite solid gains in the labor market over the last year, and that has kind of puzzled economists and policymakers. The employment report, which also showed the economy created a greater than expected 22,200 jobs last month, prompted markets to raise expectations that the central bank will raise rates again in December. Now, separate data showed Canada's industrial capacity rose 85% in the second quarter. That's the highest level since 2007, mainly on increased volumes of oil and gas extraction. In 10 years at the Canadian Chamber, I've never seen an issue that has generated greater concern among our members, the words of Dan Kelly, president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses. And to make matters worse, they're only allotting 75 days for comment in the midst of summer holidays. That's on the Liberal government's new tax reform proposals. He says it's not a consultation, it's a stealth attack on farmers and family businesses. The vast majority of our network's more than 200,000 members across Canada are small business owners. And if implemented, the proposal will restrict small business owners from sharing income with family members, limit certain forms of saving in the business, making the firm more vulnerable in bad economic times and less able to innovate and grow, and change capital gains rules, which could make it more difficult for business owners to transfer their businesses to the next generation. And the Coalition for Small Business Tax Fairness is encouraging those concerned about these changes to contact their Member of Parliament, and you can use hashtags unfair tax changes, hashtag taxes inequitables on social media. Meanwhile, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association in the U.S. kicked off a media and advertising campaign intended to shine a spotlight on how various federal tax provisions will impact U.S. cattle and beef producers. The campaign, which will focus heavily on the death tax, aims to build support in Washington for comprehensive tax reform that makes the tax code fair for agricultural producers. The campaign will be centered around a new website, that is cattlemenfortaxreform.com. The other day, I did something I've never done before. I took the portable GPS unit out of our pickup and charged it up, and I put it in my pocket and took it with me when I rode up the mountain to look for cattle. And darn, it showed that I was riding along at a speed of 6 kilometers per hour. And that's a long ways from this. Students from the team WARR at Hyperloop Pod competition recently set a new record for the Tesla-branded Hyperloop Pod. That's a vehicle, by hitting 220 miles an hour. 355 kilometers an hour, beating their previous speed record of 201 miles an hour. And this improvement supports Elon Musk's plan to get past 500 kilometers an hour. That's about half the speed of sound next month. Musk foresees another 3 or 4 years before these aluminum vehicles are capable of transporting passengers safely at speeds up to 800 miles an hour. Good grief, that's breaking the sound barrier on the ground. And Josely Batista, billionaire co-owner of JBS, the world's largest meat packer, has turned himself into authorities in Brazil after a request for his arrest was made. Both Josely Batista and his brother Wesley have admitted to bribing politicians in a plea bargain testimony in May. There has not been a request to arrest Wesley Batista so far, but the brothers resigned from their positions on the JBS board back in May. Brazil has seen political chaos in the last 3 years of a criminal investigation showing a tangled web. And amidst the bribes to politicians, a meat inspection scandal was unearthed. The investigation found that meat inspectors were bribed to pass meat through the system that was rotten. I think they mean the meat, not the system. But maybe not. Anyhow, it forced 10 out of 36 beef packing plants in Brazil owned by JBS to temporarily shut down in the spring, and many countries halted imports of Brazilian meat. And as you heard here last summer, JBS announced in July that they were selling Lakeside in Brooks to MCFA, a subsidiary of Nielsen Brothers. And many thanks to Nick Gulka of CFCW for passing that information along to us. Coming up at the BC Livestock Co-op in the coming weeks, October 2nd, Okanagan Falls regular sale. October 3rd, the Kamloops Special Calf and regular sale. October 4th, the Williams Lake Calf sale. October 5th, Williams Lake regular sale. And for more information on all those sales, just go to bclivestock.bc.ca. Meanwhile, over in Innisfail at the Innisfail Auction Market, the regular cattle sales every Wednesday, 2 horse sales a month, and the pre-sort sales are starting pretty quick too. So call ahead to book your cattle at 1-800-710-3166. And that takes us down to the final item, and this is really how it happened. Same day I took the GPS when I went to gather cattle. It was a pretty scary wreck. I'd been moving cows all morning on my good mare Cody and had taken about 40 pairs down a steep, narrow trail into Paul Creek Canyon. I let them all have a good drink at the creek, and all I wanted to do was take the group on up the bank on the north side of the creek and trail them into the north end of what we call the Bell Place. Now, there are two ways to get there: a wide but steep trail up the bank. To the left of that, a narrow creek bed that runs down from the top rim, and it's often blocked by fallen trees. Cows can get through under the fallen trees, but a horse usually can't. Well, they took the creek route, and I decided to follow them up that narrow, wet gorge to see if we could make it out the other side. Now, halfway up, the cows stirred up a nest of hornets, and boy, were they mad. Dozens of them stinging my mare, and she absolutely lost it in her panic. I tried to bail off. She was bunking and jumping around in that little narrow cavern-type place, and I wound up underneath her, and finally I was able to roll away from her flying feet, and she continued up the creek bank behind the cows. I was getting stung pretty good too, so I said, "Good luck, Cody," and I ran back down the other way because I wasn't going through those hornets. I climbed back up the other trail and followed Cody's tracks. And she wasn't too far away, and she stood waiting for me in a big meadow, but she had welts all over her face and neck and chest. Anyway, I got back on, and I rode the 1.5 miles back to home, and I had to explain to Billy why I was such a mess and covered with mud from head to foot. And I said, boy, was I lucky. If I hadn't made it out of there, no one would have found me for weeks. Nobody knew where I was. And her reply? "Oh, I would know how to find you." "Oh, really?" I said. She said, "Yep, I'd have just followed the vultures." And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, a look at how thinking outside the box can help get a horse over some of his fears when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Coming up on the Urban Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training File, how thinking outside the box can help a troubled horse. And we have more with Randy Holler, too. Now, a lot of good Western music is inspired by this time of year. And it's so good to see Red Stegall is still writing, singing, and preserving our way of life. And this one from Red sure fits with early October.
The works are almost over. We've brought the year about. We'll throw them beeves and cattle cars, we'll turn the cabbie out. So long we'll say a-wondering where the time has flown. When the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. When the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. Late October afternoons are honey in the comb. I'll settle up my wages, saddle up my roan, when the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. When frost is on the morning and the moon shows hints of snow, some see a time for parting and some for letting go. But I don't pine, for every day is like a precious stone. When the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. When the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. Late October afternoons are honey in the comb. I'll settle up my wages, saddle up my roan, when the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. Waiting with a sparkle in her eye. We'll catch up on the gossip as we pass the by and by. Not worrying the winter, the days are all our own. When the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. When the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. Late October afternoons are honey in the comb. I'll settle up my wages, saddle up my roan when the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home. I'll saddle up my wages, saddle up my roan when the cottonwoods are yellow and the wagon's headed home.
The 17th annual Spirit of the West Cruise will be something unforgettable. My wife Billy and I will be hosting a big group of ranchers, farmers, horse and cattle folks, and Spirit of the West listeners for a trip I know many of you have had on your bucket list for a long time. September 16th, 2018, we will sail out of Quebec City and cruise Canada's maritime provinces in all the glory of the fall colors, including stops in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, Sydney and Halifax, Nova Scotia, St. John, New Brunswick and the Bay of Fundy, Bar Harbor, Maine, Boston, Portland, Maine, and Cape Liberty, New Jersey, with an optional stay in New York City. Now, just for the Spirit of the West group, we have a tour of a cattle operation in Nova Scotia. We'll have all our great Western music concerts and sing-alongs, and we'll be swapping lots of ranching stories. And we'll have a lot of special activities just for our group. You'll find more details on the cruise section of our website at hugh-mclennan.com and on our cruise Facebook page, and you can always call the toll-free number 1-800-530-0131.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
The way I see it, you'll find a silver lining in just about everything. So as Summer says, adios amigos, it's just another great reason to get over to Irvine Tack and Western Wear. Boots, jeans, shirts, gloves, hoodies, jackets, exciting fall arrivals to keep you toasty when the temperature dips and drops. Irvine's has something for everyone, from cowboys and cowgirls to city folks too. It's Western Wear with a welcome twist. Off Highway 305 on Highway 2 by Crossfield, open 7 days a week. Last week we shared a situation where a very experienced horseman had a bit of a wreck. He just finished putting shoes on one of his own horses when the dog jumped down onto a tarp. And the horse just couldn't handle that situation, and even though he hadn't planned to spend the next 2 hours dealing with this tarp phobia, it turned out to be a good thing he did. Now, last week I said most of the work he did before consisted of working with the horse's sense of self-preservation and his potential trust, and he put them together. It really wasn't about the tarps or the flag, and I'll try to remember to elaborate on this next week. So, I remembered. So the trainer started with a flag on the end of a short dressage whip, and he had laid a bright blue tarp, plastic tarp, out on the ground. Now the horse was afraid of the flag, but less so as the owner began using it with a purpose in mind, help him to get straight and ready, and then taking the pressure off as soon as he got himself in a position to cross the tarp. Not even take a step on it, but just be in position to do that. From there, it didn't take too much to get the rest. The straightness and the position was the key. If the trainer could help him find that spot where he was straight, he got so he would come right across that terrifying tarp, real quiet and easy. But if the horse got crooked in his body and out of position, then his anxiety level started rising immediately. And the key here again was the owner did not approach the situation like the tarp was the problem. And I think the lesson here is sometimes we tend to get too focused and too linear in our thinking with a troubled horse. And if we can back off and try to tap into his sense of self-preservation and not drill him on what we perceive as the specific problem, then we can get a lot further. And for Irvine Saddles and Western Wear, that's the Horse Training File. And you know, something that sure helps our horses is that daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration. You can find out more about that at hoffmanshorseration.com. For over 40 years, Northlands in Edmonton has hosted Farm Fair International, one of Canada's top agricultural shows, where thousands of guests come to the Edmonton Expo Centre to show and sell top-quality livestock. November the 8th to 12th, Farm Fair International is proud to welcome international buyers from the Commonwealth of Independent States, European Union, Latin America, North America, Oceania, and South America, in addition to local ranchers. Enjoy a wide variety of Western entertainment, including stock dog trials, the Heritage Ranch Rodeo, and more. Get tickets and information at farmfairinternational.com. And now we're going back to the 25th Annual Stony Plain Cowboy Festival, backstage with Randy Holler. And Randy, you were asking about Gary Felgard's age.
And Gary celebrated a birthday just last month. When Gary turned 65, I was turning 60, and a good friend of ours from Texas was turning 60, all within a week or two of each other. So my wife Billy, and Gary's wife Lynn, and Ed Stabler's wife Mary hatched a plan that the three of us were going to spend a week celebrating these milestone birthdays. So Gary and Lynn pulled their fifth wheel from Gabriola right up to our ranch, and Ed and Mary pulled their trailer from Texas all the way to our place. And we spent a week riding, chasing cows, and playing music in the evening. And that was a while ago. Like, that was Gary's 65th. And the one he just passed now was the big 80, if you can believe
Is he
that.
80?
He turned 80.
Well, what a soldier he is, and play and sing and write a song, and boy, he does a job. He does a job. And he gets a standing ovation every place he goes, and you know what? There's a man that truly deserves it. There's a guy, you betcha.
That's for sure. He wrote a wonderful song, and we lost Ed Stabler just last spring, way before his time, to colon cancer. But Ed never recorded this song. Gary did. But Ed closed every show with it, called The Reigns of Glory.
The Reigns of Glory.
Yeah, I'll play that right now.
Yeah, I believe I've heard that song. And you put it on there and spin it with you, and we'll get the show on the road.
I rode up from the valley, high above the fields and the fences, just to watch the storm clouds gather and see the lightning how it dances on those wild and windy ranges, through the ghost of unshod horses. A faith and a pony, they carry me, and I hold the reins of glory in my hands. In my hands, I hold the reins of glory in my hands. I hear the cold white water laughing through the canyons, hear the whisper of the evergreens. Could it be the master calling? I sing the songs of freedom to the rhythm of the saddle. My faith and my pony, they carry me, and I hold the reins of glory in my hands. In my hands, I hold the reins of glory in my hands. And I will ride forever through the peace that comes from silence. The faintest trail is all I ever need. I just follow in the footsteps of the one who came before me, and he has touched everything I see. In my hands, in my hands, I hold the reins of glory in my hands. In my hands, I hold the reins of glory in my hands. I hold the reins of glory in my hands.
Well, Randy, thank you so much for doing this. I've been wanting to do it for a long, long time. And please give my best if you see Bev Monroe and Pete Hicks and Joy Smith and Alfie Meyer and George Myron and the rest of the legends. And I just hope they carry it on for a long time, and you do too.
Yeah, and thank you, and I'll sure talk to those guys and tell them I seen you and seen you. We'll see you down the trail somewhere. You.
We sure will. Thanks, Randy.
In our Classic Song of the West segment coming up, you'll hear another one from Randy Holler, and then a classic piece of cowboy poetry when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. In the Classic Song of the West segment today, here's one that was recorded by Wilf Carter for the first time in 1937. And it came out again on an old RCA Bluebird 78 originally. Was later issued on an LP collection, and Randy Holler really honors this one with an arrangement very similar to the way Wilf Carter did it, When the Sun Says Goodnight to the Prairie. Just Randy and his guitar.
When sun setting time on the prairie and its rays kiss the rangeland goodnight. When shadows start creeping around you, the night owl starts out on his flight. You hear the lone cry of the coyote as he slinks through the valley or crest. Painted pictures of gold the rangeland unfolds when the sun says goodnight to the prairie. When the sun says goodnight to the prairie, and the birds in the trees hush their songs, the cattle bed down in the valley, the night herder slowly rides along. The whole world seems wrapped deep in slumber, while the flickering ranch light grows dim. It's sure swell to go where the shadows hang low, when the sun says goodnight to the prairie. When the sun says goodnight to the prairie, I'll be headed for that great divide. There's my little blue-eyed prairie sweetheart, I'm longing to be by her side. She promised she'd meet me at twilight at the gate of the old home corral. There's romance in the air, and I'll be on my way there when the sun says goodnight to the prairie. When the sun says goodnight to the prairie, and the birds in the trees hush their songs, the cattle bed down in the valley, the night herder slowly rides along. The whole world seems wrapped deep in slumber, while the flickering ranch light grows dim. It's sure swell to go where the shadows hang low, when the sun says goodnight to the prairie. When the sun says goodnight to the prairie.
Well, today with Randy, we talked about a couple of good friends, Gary Felgard and Ed Stabler, and how we celebrated our milestone birthdays together right here at the ranch. And one evening back in February, we got a call from our friend Gene Prescott in Texas. Gene had the sad news that Ed had passed away during surgery at a hospital in San Antonio. Now, Ed was a great friend, and we rode some miles together at his ranch in Texas and here at our place. And he was a wonderful storyteller, guitar player, and his version of a poem by the Canadian poet Henry Herbert Nibbs is in our Cowboy Poetry Spotlight today. Ed Stabler and the story of Walkin' John.
Walkin' John was a big rope horse from over Morongo way. When you laid your twine on a raging steer, old John was there to stay. And if your rope was stout enough and your terrapin shell stayed on, dally wilt or hard and fast, 'twas all the same to John. When a slick-eared calf would quit the herd, deciding he couldn't wait, Old John, forgetting the scenery, would hit an amazing gait. He'd bust through them murderous cholla spikes without losing an inch of stride. And maybe you wished you was home in bed, 'cause partner, he made you ride. John was willing and stout and strong, sure-footed and Spanish broke. But I'm telling the cockeyed universe, he sure enjoyed his joke. Soon as the morning sun come up, he'd bog his head right down, till your chaps was a-flapping like an angel's wings and your hat was a floating crown. That was breakfast regular, and whether you fell or stuck, at throwing a wing-ding, John was there, just teaching the world a buck. Soon as he'd got it off in his chest and the world come back in sight, he'd settle down like an 8-day clock with the innards filed and right. We give him the name of Walkin' John once during the roundup time. That was back in the days when beef was beef and old John was in his prime. Bob was limping and Fred was sore and Homer, well, he wouldn't talk. When somebody says he's Walkin' John, he's making so many walk. But shucks, he was sold to a livery that was willing to take the chance on John's becoming a gentleman and not scared of them English pants. And I guess the sight of them toy balloons that swore on the tourists' legs got John to guessing. From that time on, he went like he walked on eggs. As smooth as soup till some tourist guy bogged down in a pair of chaps. The rest of his ignorance plumb disguised, in the rest of his rig perhaps, came floundering up to the livery and asked for to see the boss. But old Norman, he savvied his number right and gave him a gentle hoss. Yes, Walkin' John, who hadn't pitched in a year come the 1st of June. But I'm telling the knock-kneed universe, he sure recollected soon. Somebody whanged the breakfast gong, though we'd all done had our meat. And John, he started to bust in two with his fiddle between his feet. That dude spread out like a sailing bat and went flopping across the sky. He weren't dressed up for to aviate, but sister, he sure did fly. We picked him out of a cholla bush, and some of his clothes stayed on. We felt his spokes and wired his folks, but it was all the same to John.
Thank you so much for making the ride this week, and I sure hope you can join us right here next week at the same time. And thanks again to our great support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan from Meadow Springs Guest Ranch. And if you need tractor parts, just go to Mark's page, bctractorparts.com. And be sure to get the latest issue of Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine. You can subscribe online at cowboycountrymagazine.com or just call 1-800-943-7336. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.